A Rolex Submariner retails for around $10,000. The materials inside it? Roughly 500 bucks worth of steel and glass. The movement that powers it takes about a year to assemble, which sounds impressive until you realize Rolex makes nearly 1 million of them every single year. But that's not the lie. The lie is the one the entire industry tells you every single day. That these are investments, that they'll hold their value, that you're not buying a product, you're acquiring an asset. Most people think buying a Rolex is like putting money in a gold-plated savings account. You wear it for 5 years, sell it, and maybe even make a profit, right? Wrong. In reality, the moment you walk out of that boutique, you've likely lost more money than you would have by driving a brand new Mercedes off the lot. We've been sold a $50 billion story about heirlooms and assets. But 2026 data shows the facade is finally cracking. Today, we're exposing the math they don't want you to see. From the $500 steel cases to the manufactured waiting lists that shouldn't exist. Switzerland, 2026. The Federation of the Swiss watch industry just reported its second consecutive year of declining exports, down 1.7% to 25.6 billion Swiss francs. Volume fell even harder. 14.6 million watches shipped, nearly 5% fewer than the year before. And that's half the volume the industry was moving in the year 2000. Half. In a quarter century, the Swiss watch industry hasn't grown its volume. It's cut it in half and tripled its prices. Which brings us to the single most uncomfortable question in luxury. What does a luxury watch actually cost to make? Rolex uses 904L stainless steel, which is harder to machine than the 316L that most watchmakers use. It's genuinely premium material, but a kilogram of 904L steel costs a few dollars more than standard steel. The case of a Submariner weighs about 100 grams. Do the math on that and you're looking at a material cost that wouldn't cover your morning coffee. Now, Rolex doesn't disclose production costs. No luxury watchmaker does. But industry analysts have consistently estimated that a typical luxury watch has a production cost ratio of around 15% of its retail price. And that's generous, because that includes labor, materials, and assembly. So a watch selling for $10,000 costs roughly $1,500 to produce. An authorized dealer buys it from Rolex at about 40% below retail. That dealer then adds their own margin, typically 30 to 37% on each sale. And none of this is hidden, it's just never talked about. Because the moment you acknowledge the gap between what something costs to make and what it sells for, the word investment starts sounding a lot more like the word markup. But here's where it gets interesting. This margin structure isn't unusual for luxury goods. Handbags, perfume, designer clothing, they all operate with similar economics. The difference is that nobody walks into a Louis Vuitton store and says, "I'm buying this handbag as a financial asset." With watches, they do, constantly. And the industry not only allows this narrative to persist, it actively encourages it. Every brand event, every magazine ad, every influencer partnership quietly reinforces the idea that a watch on your wrist is money in the bank. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. Type watches as investments into any search engine, and you'll drown in content telling you which models to buy, which references are guaranteed to appreciate, which waiting list to join. There is an entire economy built around the idea that certain watches go up in value. And for about 3 years, between 2020 and early 2022, that was technically true. During the pandemic, a perfect storm hit the watch market. Governments were printing money, crypto was surging, interest rates were near zero, people were stuck at home, flush with cash, and looking for alternative assets. Watch prices on the secondary market went vertical. A steel Rolex Daytona that retailed for $14,000 was trading for $40,000 on the gray market. Some Patek Philippe Nautilus references hit 3, 4, 5 times retail. It was chaos. And everyone from TikTok influencers to hedge fund managers started calling themselves watch investors. Then, in March 2022, interest rates started climbing. Crypto crashed. The stimulus money dried up. And secondary watch prices didn't just correct, they collapsed. According to Morgan Stanley and Watch Charts, Secondary market prices fell for 7 consecutive quarters after that peak. In 2023 alone, Rolex secondhand prices dropped around 8%. Patek Philippe fell 16%. Audemars Piguet, 18%. Gray market dealers who'd loaded up on inventory at peak prices were suddenly sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in unrealized losses. Imagine being the dealer in Miami who woke up in 2024 to find his $400,000 safe was suddenly worth $280,000. That's not a bad month. That's a business-ending catastrophe. And here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The watches that held value during the boom were never the norm. They were the exception. A tiny handful of specific references from 3 brands: steel Rolex sports models, Patek Philippe Nautilus and Aquanaut, Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet. Everything else, and we're talking about the vast majority of watches sold worldwide, lost money the moment the buyer walked out the door. The average luxury watch loses 20 to 40% of its retail value the second you leave the store. That's not a controversial claim. That's the normal economics of consumer goods. Your car does the same thing. The difference is that nobody's telling you your Toyota Camry is going to appreciate. I mean, think about that for a second. An entire industry successfully convinced millions of consumers that a depreciating product was actually an appreciating asset. And when the market proved that wrong, the narrative didn't change. It just got quieter for a while. Even auction houses felt it. Sales of high-end watches at auction dipped 13% in 2023 compared to the boom years. The pre-owned market, which had ballooned to roughly $24 billion in annual sales, was suddenly full of inventory nobody wanted at yesterday's prices. If you're finding this valuable, hit subscribe. We break down the real economics behind the luxury lifestyle every week. Now, the markup and the investment myth are damaging enough on their own, but they're not even the biggest lie the industry tells. Waiting lists. If you've ever tried to buy a popular Rolex at retail, you know the ritual. You walk into an authorized dealer. You ask about a Submariner or a GMT Master. The salesperson gives you a sympathetic smile and tells you there's a list. Could be 6 months, could be 2 years, could be never. It's a head game. They want you to feel lucky just to spend your own money. These watches are so desirable, so rare, that simply having the privilege of buying one at retail requires patience, loyalty, and in many cases, a purchase history with the dealer. Some authorized dealers quietly expect you to buy jewelry, accessories, or less popular models before they'll even consider putting you on the list for a hot reference. But Rolex produces roughly 1.2 million watches per year. That's not a cottage industry, that's industrial-scale manufacturing. They are, by a wide margin, the largest luxury watchmaker on the planet. So why the waiting lists? One industry executive told a reporter that luxury brands want to produce, and this is a direct principle, exactly 1 fewer watch each year than there is demand for. That's not a supply problem. That's a supply strategy. It's the same playbook Ferrari uses with its cars and Hermes uses with its Birkin bags. Manufactured scarcity. Control the supply, inflate the demand, and suddenly a mass-produced consumer product feels like a rare artifact. And this strategy works precisely because it feeds the investment narrative. When you can't walk into a store and buy a watch at retail, the gray market flourishes. Prices on secondary platforms inflate beyond MSRP. And that premium gets mistaken for appreciation, when it's really just artificial scarcity doing its job. During the peak in 2022, a Rolex Daytona was trading at 145% over its manufacturer's suggested retail price. A GMT Master 2 was 118% above. Even a Submariner was 87% over sticker. But by 2024 and 2025, those premiums evaporated for many models. Secondary prices rose only 4.9% for the full year 2025. A partial recovery after 2 years of steep losses. For someone who bought at the peak, that appreciation was still deeply underwater. Meanwhile, Rolex opened a new temporary manufacturing facility in Freiburg that boosted production from 2021 through 2023. Supply increased. Dealer allocations went up. Gray market inventory piled up. The scarcity that had justified those enormous premiums was, at least in part, manufactured all along, and somehow it gets worse. Because everything we've talked about so far assumes you're buying a real watch. In 2021, the estimated value of counterfeit watches violating Swiss brands hit $1.88 billion. That single figure represented over 40% of all counterfeit goods, infringing on Swiss intellectual property. Watches weren't just part of the counterfeiting problem, they were the counterfeiting problem. According to an OECD report published in 2025, 52% of all global customs seizures of counterfeit watches involved Swiss brands. The Swiss watch industry lost an estimated $3 billion in sales due to counterfeiting in 2021 alone, along with over 6,000 jobs in Switzerland. And the quality of these fakes ranges from obvious knockoffs to near-identical replicas that can fool even experienced dealers. This matters for every person who's ever bought a pre-owned luxury watch online, because the secondary market, the same one underpinning the entire watches as investments narrative, is also the market where counterfeits thrive. Small parcel shipments and e-commerce have made detection increasingly difficult. The same platforms that make it easy to buy and sell genuine watches also make it easier than ever to move fakes. And if your investment-grade timepiece turns out to be a counterfeit, your $20,000 asset is worth exactly nothing. The brands know this. They've responded with programs like Rolex Certified Pre-Owned and Rickmont's Watchfinder platform, which offer authentication and warranty coverage on second-hand pieces. But these programs also serve another purpose. They give the brands control over the resale market, which was previously outside their grasp. It's smart business, but let's not pretend it's charity, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Because the counterfeiting epidemic exposes the fundamental fragility of the whole system. When the value of a product is 90% brand perception and 10% materials, a convincing enough copy becomes almost impossible to distinguish from the real thing. And that should terrify anyone who thinks they're holding an asset. Here's what the luxury watch industry doesn't want you to understand. The watches themselves are often extraordinary. The engineering behind a mechanical movement is genuinely remarkable. The craftsmanship in a hand-finished Patek Philippe or a Long & Söhne is art, full stop. Nobody's arguing that. The lie isn't in the product, it's in the framing. It's in calling something an investment when it's actually a purchase. It's in manufacturing scarcity for a product you make over 1 million of. It's in letting an entire generation believe that a steel bracelet on their wrist is a smarter financial move than an index fund. Because if you took that $10,000 and put it into a broad market index fund instead of a Submariner, history suggests you'd have significantly more money a decade later. And you wouldn't have to worry about scratching it, servicing it every 5 years, insuring it, or wondering whether the gray market will still want it when you're ready to sell. The Swiss watch industry exported 14.6 million watches in 2025, while the entire market absorbs roughly $24 billion in pre-owned sales alongside $50 billion in new retail. That's a staggering amount of money flowing through an ecosystem that, at its core, sells you a very beautiful, very well-made product for roughly 10 times what it costs to produce. Oh, and one more detail. Your phone tells the time for free. Now, if you've watched this far and you still want to watch, good. You should. Just buy smarter than the marketing wants you to. 3 categories that actually hold their money. First, vintage Omega Speedmaster Professionals. The original Moonwatch. You can find pre-owned examples between $3,000 and $7,000, and they've held 60 to 80% of their value consistently because the demand is tied to genuine history, not manufactured hype. Second, Tudor Black Bay 58. Rolex's sister brand, same build quality, fraction of the markup. Pre-owned models sit around 3 to 4,000, and they've become the go-to recommendation from collectors who actually know the market. Third, and this is the real insider move, discontinued Rolex steel sport references. Not the current models sitting in gray market purgatory. The older references like the GMT Master 216710 or the Submariner 16610. These have already weathered multiple market corrections and still sit comfortably above their original retail prices decades later. The pattern is simple. Buy watches with real heritage, proven demand, and no active hype cycle inflating the price. If you're paying a gray market premium on a current model, you're the exit strategy for someone else's trade. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. So is a luxury watch a terrible buy? Not necessarily. If you love mechanical engineering, if you appreciate craftsmanship, if wearing something beautiful on your wrist genuinely makes your day better, then it's worth every cent. But only if you're honest about what you're buying. You're buying art, you're buying engineering, you're buying the feeling, you're not buying an investment. The real question isn't whether luxury watches are worth the money. It's whether the industry that sells them to you has been honest about what that money is actually buying. And based on $50 billion of evidence, the answer is no. If you want to understand what wealth actually costs, and why so many things that look like assets are really just expensive habits, subscribe. We break this down every week. Next video goes into the real cost of super yacht ownership, and why $100 million net worth still isn't enough. Links on screen now.